Hi Dhruv, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm
Thank
doing
you for
great.
having me here, Nitin. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here and
Mm,
जब से हमने फ्लाइट पे और ट्रैवल करना शुरू किया है the
mm,
only constant name that we have heard of is yatra.com. मतलब I
mm,
believe in fact to be honest जब मैं फर्स्ट टाइम
mm,
ट्रैवल किया था
mm.
फ्लाइट पे तो मैंने yatra.com से ही टिकट बुक की थी अपनी
Right. Okay.
सो एक्साइटेड दैट आपने अपना टाइम दिया और आप आज यहाँ आए हैं
Mm,
I'm sure lot
mm,
of people will learn a lot about travel industry, ticketing
Sure.
platform,
Mm,
online aggregator
mm.
platform, a lot from you. So thank you for being here.
Not at all. My pleasure. Thank you. Mm,
So a lot of people already know about what Yatra.com is and
Right.
you know how you started, what was your entrepreneurial journey, so as to say.
Sure.
What we are going to talk about today is more around how to build a business in this category.
Mm,
You know, how to scale, how to acquire customers, all of that.
Right.
बट कुछ लोगों के हमारे पास कुछ एक्साइटिंग क्वेश्चंस भी आए थे और
Okay.
सबसे जो प्रोमिनेंट क्वेश्चन लोगों ने बोला कि यार
Mm,
ये तो पूछना ही पूछना है विच
mm.
इज कोई हैक है ऐसा कि हम सबसे सस्ती टिकट बुक कर सकते हैं।
एक सिंपल सा हैक तो ये है कि आप yatra.com पे आके साइन अप करके देख सकते हैं। टिपिकली व्हाट विल हैपन है कि इंडस्ट्री में आज की डेट में साइंड इन लॉग्ड इन कस्टमर्स के लिए स्पेशल फेयर्स और डील्स मिलना शुरू हो रही हैं। तो वो एक अपॉर्चुनिटी है बिकॉज मार्केट में जो अदरवाइज आप देखते हो वो एक नॉर्मल फेयर होता है, राइट? बट अगर आप एक साइंड इन कस्टमर हो या आप लॉग्ड इन यूज़र हो या आप जैसे यात्रा के केस में अगर आप प्राइम मेंबर हो, सब्सक्रिप्शन मेंबर हो, तो वहाँ पे आपको काफ़ी बेनिफिट मिल सकता है क्योंकि क्लोज यूज़र ग्रुप के अंदर there will always be some special deals and offers which will be available. The other simple thing is to book in advance. Obviously अभी अब जैसे हॉलीडे सीजन है, लास्ट मिनट ट्रैवल है, prices are going to be high. So it's always better to be planned when it comes to traveling and not wait till the last minute. Right?
बट इज दिस अ ट्रेंड इन
Hmm.
इंडिया और आउटसाइड इंडिया ऑल्सो हैव यू सीन के पीपल बुक इन एडवांस वर्सेज आउटसाइड इंडिया पीपल आर मोर प्लान्ड।
See, outside India, तो people are very planned. When we used to work in e-bookers in Europe, उन दिनों क्या होता था कि समर हॉलीडे लोग जनवरी में प्लान करके बुक किया करते थे. So January used to be a big period. Similarly, August, September used to be a big period because people will come back from summer holiday and then book for December, Christmas, New Year, right? हमारे यहाँ it's still a much more last minute kind of booking process right now, but that's also changing because airfares are going up. People realize कि coming closer to the date, prices will go up only. So it's better to plan and book in advance. So at least holiday travel जो है वो धीरे धीरे उसकी विंडो बढ़ती जा रही है. People are now booking at least 30 to 60 days in advance. And on the domestic side, international maybe a bit more, right? More in the 60 to 90. But yeah, business travel will remain just by its very nature much more last minute.
कोई स्पेसिफिक ऐसा सेक्टर होता है जहाँ पे आपको दिखता है कि यार यहाँ पे सबसे ज़्यादा डिमांड आती है लाइक दिल्ली टू चंडीगढ़ या दिल्ली टू मुंबई एनी
Yeah.
पर्टिकुलर एरियाज एंड व्हाई इज दैट।
See, थोड़ा बहुत सीजनैलिटी होगी, बट ऑन अ होल यू विल सी द मेट्रोज दिल्ली बॉम्बे के बीच में ट्रैफिक, बॉम्बे बैंगलोर के बीच में, दिल्ली बैंगलोर के बीच में, because these are the business and commercial hubs, right? So इनके बीच में obviously there's a tremendous amount of traffic that happens. The flights are also allocated accordingly by the airlines. But एक बड़ा जो change आ रहा है पिछले 3-4 सालों में, and कोविड के बाद especially, it's got even accentuated, is the flights and the traffic from the main metros to the tier 2, if I can call it, regional capitals. So दिल्ली पटना हो गया, मुंबई वाराणसी हो गया, गुवाहाटी बैंगलोर हो गया, राइट? दीज आर न्यू सेक्टर्स विच आर इमर्जिंग बिकॉज इन सेक्टर्स में उन कैचमेंट एरिया का, अगर पटना है जैसे, राइट, तो पूरा बिहार का जो कैचमेंट एरिया का ट्रैफिक है, देयर इज डिस्पोजेबल इनकम ग्रोथ हैपनिंग इन स्टेट्स, and people from there when they're traveling into a metro, they're migrating from a rail to a bus. So log जैसे Bihar में, they will come into Patna to catch a flight into Delhi, right? That's still much more efficient than just taking a train and coming in over 24 or 36 hours, right? ऐसे ही अगर आप देखें यूपी से जो ट्रैफिक जा रहा है into Bombay, so Lucknow, Varanasi, right? These guys are coming into these cities and then catching traffic from there into a metro. So ये काफी significant shift आ रहा है पिछले कुछ सालों में.
जो उड़ान स्कीम है इज
हाँ.
दैट द रीजन व्हाई दिस ग्रोथ इज हैपनिंग।
See, Udan is still at even one level below this in terms of smaller airports. Here we are still talking about larger airports being maintained by Airport Authority of India. कुछ cases में beginning to be privatized, right? But there is still a lot of growth in demand from here. एक और चीज which anecdotally has happened is you talk to people and people from these cities will tell you इससे पहले ट्रेन से जाया करते थे, right? But COVID के टाइम पे people said, okay, let me spend a little bit extra and take a flight because it's a safer way or perceived to be safer way of traveling, right? And now that's become habit. अरे यार फ्लाइट इतना कन्वीनियंट थी तो ठीक है अगर थोड़ा बहुत ₹1000 एक्स्ट्रा लग रहे हैं but rather than spending 30 hours in a train,
Correct.
let's just spend that little bit extra and take a flight.
Yeah.
So the value of time and also safety, cleanliness, security, all of that is now being factored into pricing.
ओके तो अगर हम टिकटिंग की बात
हाँ.
करते हैं, यू स्टार्टेड आउट विद हैक्स.
Right.
एक टिकट का प्राइस बढ़ता है घटता है डिपेंडिंग ऑन डिमांड, राइट?
Right.
बट हाउ एग्जैक्टली इज द टिकट प्राइस कैलकुलेटेड?
See, the ticket price is typically calculated by the airlines as a complex revenue management software that most of the large airlines will deploy. And that will run different algorithms based on demand, seasonality, patterns that they've historically seen. And on the basis of that, they will then calculate the final price, right? Input cost bhi leke. The reason in India the buying behavior till recently was that people would wait till the last minute is because we had some players who would drop fares at the last minute.
Yeah.
So look, people will just wait and see, yaar, acha, shayad sasti milegi, wait karte raho till the last minute. But now we've seen that with some of these, the fringe airlines getting weaker to a certain extent. And there being some mergers that have happened, right? So you've seen the Tata Group merge with Air India. So now over a period of time, Vistara and Air India will merge. Recently, Air India Express and Air Asia merged, right? So you're seeing a lot more structure and method coming into the madness, if I can call it that.
स्टूडेंट अगर कोई है उसको समझना है कि यार यात्रा.com का बिजनेस मॉडल क्या है, हाउ वुड यू एक्सप्लेन दैट?
So Yatra.com का अगर आपको मॉडल समझना है, there are two things to this, right? From a customer segmentation point of view, एक हमारा customer segment consumer है, which is what you see under Yatra.com. The other is business, and we provide a technology platform to large business houses, right? चाहे वो TCS हैं, TechM हैं, HCL, EY, PwC, KPMG. तो यहाँ हम एक technology solution provide करते हैं for managing their business travel. So these are the two facets of what we do. Our consumer side platform will connect a buyer with airline inventory, and then obviously they go through it, and then for doing the same and providing this as a service, we will get maybe a small distribution fee from the airline, and then we get some convenience fee that the customer pays. The same will happen in the case of hotels. Hotels may, because there is a lot more fragmented supply, the effort involved in terms of aggregating is a lot more, right? There, it's not just around a technology integration, it's also looking at the kind of product. So hotel किस category का है, hotel में क्या customer experience रहा है historically, right? So providing all of that input measures which a customer will take while making the decision is something that we will do. And then again, you get a take rate from the hotel, and then you have a small convenience fee which is there to the customer. So it's more of a platform play, right? In some cases, we will buy inventory as well, right? In the case of holiday packages, for example, we will package it together on the basis of inventory that we've acquired from the airlines or from the hotels and give it as a bundled offering to the customer. On the corporate side, it'll be this plus something else, meaning that there is a technology solution that will integrate into the ERP system of the company, into the HRMS system. Company का जैसे approval process mechanism है, वो flow सारा इस पे रहेगा. Company will have different policies of what their employees can buy, when they can book, what class they can travel in. All of those policies will get configured, and the employee can only see what he or she is eligible for. Then that is then backed by detailed MIS, analytics around spending patterns, around the kind of missed savings opportunity which are there, and complete financials MIS to support the organization, right? So that is a much more complex kind of product with a lot more ancillary services built on top, right? So those are the two things that we are involved with. Yeah.
Are there any price advantages to companies who are buying through a corporate channel?
So there will definitely be price advantages because corporates are buying in bulk. right? There is at least, a committed volume that they will have for the
But
full
do they
year.
like pay upfront?
Right. No. So about 30% of them work in a similar manner on corporate credit cards, and about 70% of them work on a credit cycle, right? So currently, we are looking at about a 28-day kind of average DSO,
What is DSO?
a day sale outstanding,
Okay.
right? So the credit period is about
Got
28
it.
days.
Just
Yeah.
like you have it in a retail kind of channel.
So on the retail side, typically what will happen is customers pay on the credit card, they
Yeah.
pay
They
immediately.
pay upfront. Yeah.
Right. Similarly, on the corporate side, about 30% of corporate employees will pay using their corporate card,
Right.
right? And then the balance 70% are companies where we extend credit.
Got it. So corporate side और retail side का आपने दोनों का बताया,
Yeah.
right? अगर मैं percentage split की बात करूँ इस time पे, what's the biggest chunk of revenue come from? Is it from B2B, which is corporate, or B2C?
So typically till pre-COVID, our business was 50-50 in terms of gross bookings. Last year, consumer recovered first. Corporate started recovering in the second half of the year. But if you look at a more normalized pre-COVID kind of environment, B2C, B2B के बीच में it was approximately 50-50.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what's your plan? आपको लगता है कि B2B में आपको ज़्यादा focus करना है?
See, हम लोग पिछले 5-6 सालों से B2B पे focus कर रहे हैं, because there I feel it's also more about a product and a technology than just the pricing. B2C over a period of time has evolved into a highly competitive price-led dynamic, right? So वहाँ then it's a matter of who's discounting more at what point of time. And unfortunately, at some point or the other, there'll always be some irrational competitor, right? हर एक के अपने कुछ internal dynamics होते हैं, उसके basis पे they will decide to take certain steps. So pricing can vary. So we want to remain a strong player in B2C, but we want to be the market leader in B2B. But we are the largest player in the country in terms of large corporate travel management, and we want to strengthen that position.
But is B2C also act as a funnel for you for B2B?
Ulta, B2B acts as a funnel for B2C.
Achha.
Because when you think about it, right, the employees of all these companies at the end of the day are also retail consumers.
Right.
See, travel एक ऐसा product है जो आप business के लिए use करते हो और personally भी use करते हो. So the overlap is very high. So for us, B2B acts as a feeder into B2C as well. Yeah.
Okay.
And I feel अगर, if I truly look at my vision from a 10-year perspective, I want it to be a scenario कि आज जैसे we cover about 7 million employees. 10 साल बाद we should be talking about 40-50 million employees, right? And then you don't need to think of it separately as B2C.
Correct.
Right? That catchment, and this is just employees. If you think about from there, right, each one supporting a family of 4, you can pretty much cover
Absolutely.
the vast majority of the consuming middle class in India by doing that. So that is how I would think about it, right? If I'm thinking 10-15 years down the road.
Got it. इसको ना हम ब्रेक करेंगे अब.
हाँ.
Okay? So you gave a very good number from 7 to 50 million corporates का, right? But starting से एक बार बात करते हैं so that people who are trying to build something in the similar space can also get to know.
Right.
So when you started out Yatra.com, first 100 customers वो B2C रहे होंगे या B2B थे?
बिल्कुल. So हम लोग पहले अपने existence के 7-8 साल we were only B2C.
अच्छा.
Right? Or largely B2C. Maybe there might have been a fringe corporate here or there, but it was largely B2C only. Yeah.
So when you started out, how did you acquire your first 100 customers?
I think the first 100 customers typically came through some kind of a, online marketing, online demand generation, right? As we were testing the model. But luckily for us, थोड़ा बहुत press में PR वगैरह थी. Those were the early days of internet.
Yeah.
And there was some excitement about new internet companies, right? So we reached the first 100 very quickly. In this maybe second, third day itself, we had reached about 100 customers.
So were you investing in Google ads or marketing spends at that time?
Us time, not really. It was largely driven by PR.
Okay.
And then from there, it scaled up. Right. Uske baad, then once and that's why I'm saying only 100, but maybe in the B2C context, 100 might not be the last,
correct.
the right measure, right? वहाँ let's say, how did we go from 10,000 and beyond?
Yeah.
Because पहले 5 से 10,000 तो I think just on the basis of PR, word of mouth, you were able to get that.
Right.
And also back in those days, there were enough and more people in India in that first top, let's say 1 million, who had witnessed and experienced these things in international markets.
Correct.
Quick to try them out in the Indian market, and the word of mouth spread. But beyond, let's say 10,000 customers, From there, the scale up happened largely on the back of consumer marketing, right? We were one of the first ones, if not the first ones, if my memory serves me right, to start collaborating with Bollywood. We first had Baman Irani as a brand ambassador. We built a film with him, and that was very successful in terms
Which
of
was the
the
film? You
adoption.
remember?
It was a small, a video ad, right?
Acha,
I
video
mean,
ad.
an ad that we put together with him, and that ad was quite successful, built high recall for us, brought in instant scalability from there. Then obviously it was combined with other press ads, etc. Right? So just the typical things you would follow in terms of building out a consumer brand back in that day. See, remember, tab mobile internet did not exist, right?
TV
And
was the only medium.
TV was the only medium. Broadband was very low. So YouTube also, while it was there, the consumption was still in its nascency, right? So, and from a Google search point of view, again, very, very shallow,
Yeah.
right?
The volume was not
Right?
that
Volume
big.
was not that large.
Yeah.
Somewhere around 2009-10, that started changing quite dramatically. And then obviously post Geo, it moved to a whole different level. Right?
Correct.
After the country itself is online, but maybe 15 years ago or 17 years ago, it wasn't the case.
तो अगर आपको आज करनी होती yatra.com start, would that be also the first step of investing in TV ads, or you would have looked at it differently?
No, today we would look at it very differently. And that's also a function of our media plans today, right? So when we look at this, all the online channels, the social channels, especially for a product like travel, play a very important role.
Right.
Right? We've realized that there are obviously a lot of influencers, but beyond that, also the influencer market is very deep. You've got tremendous amount of micro influencers who can get your word out there at a very, very effective cost. Right? So the online channels today are playing the dominant role when it comes to media selection. I mean, you look at Cricket World Cup, right? Hotstar was showing data around 3.5 crore people watching a cricket game, right? Now that kind of instant reach is very hard to build anywhere else, right? So I think that way the online world has truly come of age. And now the lines I feel between online and offline when it comes to doing pretty much anything are blurred. Your transaction processes work in that manner. People might research online, at times book offline if it's a high value product. If it's a low value product, they will research and book online itself, right? So the lines are completely blurred today between online and offline. A customer is just choosing any one of the channels based on his or her convenience. But they're very, very fungible. And I think that's a big difference. Right? People used to say online player hai, offline player hai. I think in today's day and age, it's pretty much the same. You have to, as a company, think of them all as just your distribution and customer acquisition channels.
Correct.
Right? You look at the number of D2C brands that have emerged. I mean, their product is still consumed completely offline.
Correct.
But their entire strategy around customer acquisition is centered around online.
Yeah, and through influencers. Yeah. Abhi, so आपने बोला कि lot of these new sectors are emerging when it comes to flights, right? But are the bookings also happening from these tier 2, tier 3 cities?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What's the आपने last 5-7 साल में क्या evolution रहा है इसका?
I think वहाँ अगर आप देखो, for a lot of people coming in from these markets, the only thing they know is online, right? So they don't have a legacy catch up to do कि से अच्छा मैं travel agent use करता था, मैं पहली बार आ रहा हूँ, मैंने सुना है online ticket सस्ती मिलती है because it's more transparent, right?
Yeah.
And people will come and search. They're doing everything else online, right? Their entire consumption is on a mobile device. चाहे वो entertainment है, चाहे वो e-commerce है, चाहे वो कुछ और कर रहे हैं, everything is on a mobile device.
So अगर हम बात करें metro cities, जो transition हुई typical travel agent to online,
Right.
tier 2, tier 3 have just started directly through online.
Absolutely. And एक और example अगर मैं आपको दूं, जब हम पहले paper tickets हुआ करती थी, right? I think a lot of your viewers might be too young to recall that. But एक ज़माने में paper ticket मिला करती थी.
Right.
So when it transitioned from paper to e-ticket, there was a lot of chaos in different parts of the world. But India के अंदर the adoption moved so seamlessly because for a lot of people who were coming into the category for the first time, especially thanks to the low-cost carriers back then, people like Air Deccan or Indigo, they only knew e-tickets. अगर मेरे को और कुछ पता ही नहीं है तो I don't have a preconceived notion.
Yeah.
Right? The same is the case
मतलब
out
तो
here.
by default setting ही वही है.
बिल्कुल.
Yeah, right.
My natural thing to do
Yeah.
is to get a SMS लेके आप एयरपोर्ट पहुंच जाओ, या अब तो आपको एटलीस्ट ये है कि आपको ईमेल आ गई, आपको व्हाट्सएप आ गया, राइट? आपके पास पूरा QR कोड वहां पे है. अब अगर आपने डिजी यात्रा डाउनलोड करी हुई है तो आपको वो भी कुछ वैलिडेशन भी नहीं करानी, आप सीधा आओ, स्कैन करो और अंदर जाओ.
Correct.
So it's a very very seamless process, and because this is the first time they're doing it, वो लेगेसी इशू नहीं है.
You were talking about seasonality. A lot of times there are seasonalities. जैसे अभी दिल्ली इस टाइम पे दिसंबर में गोवा बहुत होने लग जाता है, right? There are different kind of seasonal effects. How do you cater to that seasonality and ensure जो आपका growth है कंपनी का, whatever your targets are, वो आपके achieve होते जा रहे हैं? How do you counter the seasonality effects?
See, I think now we've been around for such a long time कि at least we have a good understanding of how the seasonality will play out, right? We've got enough and more data based on historical trends to see कि कहाँ क्या होने वाला है at what point of the year. So at least your baseline is covered. And there is a strong predictive analytics tool that we have, which has been built in-house over the years, which will look at this data and start looking at the trends.
From the last 10-5 years.
बिल्कुल,
Okay.
बिल्कुल. और उसकी ट्रेंडिंग के बेसिस पे then we know कि यार कहाँ पे क्या challenges आएंगे, at least to some extent, and कहाँ opportunities हैं. So that part, I think by now we've got enough historical data to start modeling that out.
But travel में तो मतलब मेरा perception ये है, if flights are going up, like flight bookings are going up, on those areas of course hotel bookings, cab bookings will also go up. Correlation है क्योंकि बहुत सीधा सीधा. Is there any business specifically in the travel domain which goes up even if the flights are going down? कुछ ऐसा होता है ऐसा?
See, correlation की आप जैसे बात कर रहे हो, वो correlation है in certain destinations, not all.
Okay.
Meaning some destinations are VFR destinations, right?
What is VFR?
घर जा रहे हो आप, visiting friends and family, right? अब जैसे दिवाली आ रही है, this is a peak time where you will see traffic going from metro to non-metro.
Right.
Because a lot of the young kids or people are coming in from the non-metros to work in the metros. So there you won't have a correlation of hotels. Similarly, अगर आप summer holidays में देखो, into the northern hills or let's say hill stations, be it Western Ghats में, you will have high demand of hotels, but the flights might not go up in the same proportion, right? Because there's a lot of driving holidays, bus travel which is happening into these destinations. So वो भी होगा. So hotel demand, Goa might be synergistic, right? Leh might be synergistic. But it's not कि हर market में वो dynamic है.
Right.
I think हम लोग Goa has become, fortunately for India, such a prominent outlier to a certain extent. And now Goa is no longer seasonal as well, right? Now it's like 365 days a year kind of a destination. But you're still right कि Christmas, New Year पे Goa में दोनों होंगे. But there'll be a lot of other places where you will see only hotel demand go up and flight might not go up to the same extent.
What's the example of that destination?
As I said, all the hill stations, right? People will drive down from Chandigarh to Shimla, right? People will drive from Delhi to Shimla,
especially during Christmas time and New Year. Right. Channels की एक बार अगर हम बात करें तो of course lot of channel contribute to the growth of the business, right? Do you have any split कि यार influencer marketing से अंदाजा इतना % growth होता है या TV ads are still the prominent for us? Do you have any percentage split for Yatra.com?
See, I'd look at it again, start with firstly there are some parts which are brand led. Let me break that answer slightly differently, which are not going to have an immediate return, right? And then there are some pieces which you are doing for an immediate return. Those will be different, right? So you will have brand marketing which will be there, and then you'll have transaction led marketing which will be there. Historically, brand was largely led by television and print, right? Today, you've got YouTube playing a very active role as well, along with the other social platforms to help build out the brand. The difference is more today in terms of the messaging. Our brand mein you're trying to build out a more aspirational message, and in a response ad, you're trying to build out a more transactional message. But the platform is the same, right? You will see ads which will be on, let's say YouTube, that will say, for this limited time period, you're getting this offer between, let's say, Yatra.com and a bank, right? So if you have an ICICI card or if you have a Visa card, you get this special offer on, right? So that will be a response ad. As you get into,
जिसका प्योर गोल रहता है रेवेन्यू इंक्रीज करना,
बिल्कुल, immediate response
Immediate,
drive करना है, limited time offer है, right? Then there will be others which will talk at a more holistic level around maybe, benefits of travel, right? Spending time together with the family, or, around long-term features of doing it online, right? Those are there to build the brand and brand saliency. उनका objective slightly different है. उनका objective top of mind recall grow करना है, right? So there we'll work with an agency which after these campaigns will see how the top of mind recall has built up, right?
Okay.
And that will then lead to further inducement of trial. So अगर आप marketing को देखो, आप awareness कर रहे हो, आप trial induce कर रहे हो, उसके बाद transaction हो रहा है, उसके बाद आप repeat buying में जा रहे हो और फिर आप वो cycle, बार बार उसको loop में ला रहे हो. So you create a virtuous cycle around that, right? Some will focus more on the top of the funnel to drive people to come in, explore, and then some will be there more focused on conversion. ये जो traffic आ रहा है इसको मैं better convert कैसे करूँ?
What would be the percentage अगर आपको 100 rupees खर्च करने हैं example, how much percentage as a CEO would you invest in branding exercises versus the immediate growth?
And that changes with the life cycle of the company, right? आज की date में, because brand recall is still relatively high, you will have almost 75% happening on response. On response.
On response.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
अगर मैं उसको आज से 5 साल 7 साल पहले देखूं, maybe it would have been 60-40 in favor of the brand.
When do you decide कि यार अब मुझे ये जो पैसा है वो ब्रांडिंग पे ज़्यादा लगाना है versus immediate response पे?
See, आप कुछ दो चीज़ें हैं. एक तो थोड़ा डेटा आप देखोगे, right? You will see in terms of what's happening to your new customer growth number. Are you getting new customers in or are you only farming your existing base? अगर आपकी न्यू कस्टमर ग्रोथ टेपर हो रही है, दैट मीन्स आपको टॉप ऑफ द फनल को थोड़ा एक्सपैंड करना है, राइट?
So you have to invest more in immediate one.
नहीं, then you will focus more in terms of brand saliency, ताकि नए लोग जो कैटेगरी में आ रहे हैं, they can think of Yatra when they come online.
Right.
Right. If you are more focused on saying कि मेरे को immediate response भी drive करना है, then you will do more tactical. But tactical में एक challenge ये होगा कि आपका existing जो set है, उसमें भी dilution होगी.
Okay.
Right. Because आपका funnel जो है वो तो ज़्यादा grow नहीं हुआ. Funnel तो उतने का उतना ही रहा. Or you basically converted people who are already coming into your category. So your conversion has improved, but your number of people coming into the funnel has not gone up that dramatically. Obviously, दोनों के बीच में थोड़ा spillover होगा, but just at a first principle level, right? You will see more of existing guys converting rather than getting new customers in. So brand का role is to a certain extent expand the top of the funnel.
You mentioned something कि यार फिर हम measure करते हैं कि whether the top of the recall brand recall has increased or not.
Yeah.
ये measurement का तरीका क्या रहता है?
So typically क्या होगा, you'll engage with the agency. That agency will do first principle surveys. So they will do they'll ask people
to your
recall
existing
questions,
customers,
right? नहीं. To independent customers, nothing to do with us.
Okay.
Because हम market में see our category is such कि it's a fairly pervasive category, right? 140, 150 million people are there. So metros में obviously there is high incidence of travel that happens. So these agencies will then speak to people independently and say which are the top 3 brands that you think of, for example, when you think of travel.
Right.
Right. So A, B, C, 1, 2, 3.
And that's a priority order.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Which is the one that first comes to mind. Right. Then there will be an unaided recall. So you won't even give examples of brands. You will just say, आप बताओ आपने एक कौन सा आपको
नाम सुना है,
right? अच्छा दूसरा कौन सा सुना है? Then there will be aided recall. अच्छा आपने ये नाम सुने हैं, right? So that way the agencies will do this, and it's a fairly structured thing that's been happening for years and years.
And how often do you do this?
We will typically do this, subsequent pre a campaign,
okay,
to establish a benchmark, and post a campaign to see the kind of change which has happened. And then you will follow this through to say, okay, yeah.
What's the typical scale or budget of these kind of campaigns normally?
In terms of campaigns for testing recall or in terms of the brand campaigns?
Brand campaigns as well as the percentage of testing recall compared to the overall brand campaign.
Sure. So test and recall is not that expensive, right? I mean, depending on the kind of sample size that you're using, it'll cost maybe anywhere between, 10 to 20, 25 lakhs, right, to do this. Okay. But the brand campaigns will be different, right? Brand campaigns, I think there is so much clutter that's happening in online media today that you need to keep spending more and more to stand out at a brand level, right? And the rough rule of thumb we've used is that from a share of, at least in the target audience that you're looking at, you need to be able to get 3 plus visibility. So there will be a media plan that, which will send the media planners who will work with you to say, अगर मैं इस channel पे इतना spend करता हूँ, this is my target group. Will my target group be able to see my ad more than 3 times or not? Because they're at least in your core segment. To be able to build recall, you need 3 plus kind of views in a short span of time.
अगर आपने 3 बार हमारी ad देखी
हाँ, तो the chances of recall will go up, right? अगर आपने एक बार आते जाते देखी, the chances are you will miss it, right?
अच्छा.
So that's how the media plans are set up, right? That you are looking at the number of views that you want to create in a core target group and see that at least the recall builds up from there.
And that has changed. पहले ऐसा एक से होता था, 3 से होने लगा.
पहले भी यही था, but ये है कि अब क्योंकि clutter बढ़ता जा रहा है, the spend needed to get 3 plus has gone up immensely, right? The other way people try and do this also is typically maybe use a celebrity, right? The reason for using a celebrity is because it helps break clutter. Like for the longest period of time, and in the middle we were working with Salman Khan.
Right.
The objective of working with him and a superstar at that level was that it instantly built recall and cut through the clutter, right? So that's what you're trying to do over there. The other way is that people will try and build out quirky ads, right? But quirky ads then become a hit and a miss. कि आपको लग रहा है आपकी एजेंसी ने पिच किया कि वो quirky है, but customer के उसमें recall maybe ना build हो. I think there are few ads that really stand out. Many years ago, Naukri did an ad of a guy called Hari Sadhu, right? अगर आपने नहीं देखी है तो YouTube पे आपको search करना. And that was a really clutter-breaking ad for its time. So that's how people will try and do it, right? They will either use a celebrity or they will try and do something which is very quirky.
Ad? थोड़ा बताएंगे उस पे?
I think वो आपको YouTube पे search करनी पड़ेगी. नौकरी की ad with Hari Sadhu.
Okay.
Okay. But the way they were able to play on these words and the name of someone to be able to build recall is very high, right? So I think those are the kind of things which are there. Unfortunately, I don't watch as much media now, so I don't know off late कौन सी quirky ads चल रही हैं, but I'm sure you and your viewers will have some ad that will stand out in their mind, right? So that's what you're trying to do, because on the celebrity side, you feel कि by working with someone, you're able to break the clutter. But then you have to also balance it out that there will be some celebrities which are doing a lot of ads. So maybe it doesn't achieve the objective, right? Because if that celebrity is working with a brand that's spending 100 crores and you're spending 30, the chances are that brand will become synonymous with that celebrity and the rest of the brands that celebrity is working with will get forgotten, right?
But you can't put that in the clause. With
No, you can't put it in any clause, but that's the judgment that you have to do, right? That's what you as a brand manager have to ascertain, right? And typically you'll work with an agency also that will provide you some input on this.
So how were you able to rope in Salman Khan? और उस पे एक चीज interesting ये भी है that he's not just your brand ambassador, he was also a shareholder.
He was a shareholder as well. Right. And that's the reason we did this, right? Because otherwise he also does not really have any vested interest in working with Yatra.
Was it easy or difficult to get him?
It's a great experience. It was a great experience working with him, right? We were also fortunate at that time. We had TV18 as a shareholder. They had Viacom 18, so there were some connects from there that we were able to leverage, and that's how it all fell together. Over the years, that market has become more and more structured, right? There are agencies that work with these brands, with these superstars, right? And I'm calling because they are also brands in themselves, right? Each one of them stands for something, whether it's a top cricketer, whether it's a top film star, right? And these agencies will work with them. So now it's a very, very structured way of working, because subsequent to that, we also worked for a short period of time with Ranbir Kapoor a few years later, right? And by then things had begun to be much more structured.
How do you figure out which celebrity would be the right fit for you?
I think you have to also do some kind of dip test in terms of your customer segment,
Okay.
right? So you have to decide what is the segment, who are the stars, who that segment relates to. So there'll be some attribute matching which will happen, right? What are the things which are important to your segment? What are the things does that brand ambassador stand for those qualities or not, right? During the time that we were working with Salman, he was also associated with Dabang and the Dabang series of movies. All these things around मैं एक बार commitment कर रहा हूँ. So transparency and all of that, right? So you have to see what connects with your target audience. Yeah.
जो अभी जैसे सब लोगों का focus is to acquire attention of Gen Zs,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Then the brand or celebrities that you rope in
Right.
would be the ones
Absolutely,
who are focusing more on
absolutely,
Gen
yeah,
Zs
yeah,
or have those attributes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How much do you typically spend on a celebrity-led campaign in a year?
See, what rule of thumb we used was that whatever you're paying the celebrity, right, your spends have to be at least 5x of that.
Okay.
नहीं तो you're not getting full coverage and return on the spend for the celebrity. Then you might as well focus your efforts in terms of building out a more quirky ad rather than spending if your budget is limited, right? So that's the rule of thumb that we've always used कि at least अगर आप celebrity को use कर रहे हो, the spend has to be 5x plus of what you're paying the celebrity. So if you're paying someone, let's say 5 crores,
Yeah.
then your campaign has to be at least a 25 crore
25
campaign. Otherwise, it's not worth it. Then you might as well put that 5 also in your campaign and expand the campaign to like 25, 30. Yeah.
Right, right. Influencers की हम बात कर रहे थे बीच में.
Yeah.
How often have you tried influencer campaign, and is it like a part of your existing core media plan?
So for the last 12 months, it's become more of an integral part. It started off with a few things that we were trying to do with micro influencers, and the return that we saw was very healthy.
Compared to TV or
compared
other...
to any other media for that matter, right? So what we decided was it was better for us to start working with a larger number of micro influencers, right? Because influencers maybe hota na, see, you've got some who've got large following, but then things get lost.
Yeah.
Or your return gets compromised, right? So from that perspective, we've realized working with micro influencers, it's more hard work for the company to identify 50, 100 influencers that you're working with, rather than saying ये एक influencer है, इसके channel पे we participate. That's the easiest thing for the marketing team to do.
Yeah.
Right? For them to say हमारा तो KRA achieve हो गया, right? But the harder part is finding out a larger audience or larger number of influencers whose cumulative audience will add up, but the cumulative spend will be lower than giving it to one influencer, right? So doing that kind of segmentation and that kind of analysis is very important.
And that is also taken care by your existing marketing internal team or agencies?
Largely by internal teams supported by the agencies. We try and push our teams to be more data focused, right? People have perceptions. Data is reality, right? So that just takes the noise out of the system.
Right.
I mean, आप अगर एक बार number देख रहे हो, then your decision making is based on the numbers. It's not around my perception. नहीं तो क्या होता है अगर आप numbers नहीं देख रहे हो, everyone will have a point of view on someone, especially something as subjective as this. So we try and move away from the subjective part of the conversation and focus on the numbers.
So yours approach towards decision making is always supported and backed by numbers.
मेरा हमेशा यही है कि मेरे को number दिखा दो, right? मुझे data दिखा दो, मुझे number दिखा दो, and I find that inherently easier to base decisions on that as opposed to just a conversation.
So overall 100% composition अगर हम बोले pie chart में, what would be the spend percentage wise that you're doing on influencer marketing?
It's now becoming almost 20% of the overall spend.
20%. Yeah. That's a huge number.
Yeah.
Okay.
And आज से 3 साल पहले तो ये zero था, right? Pre-COVID तो obviously exist नहीं करता था. Last year also it would have been maybe 5-7%.
And
So the share is increasing. Yeah.
And is this even more prevalent in tier 2, tier 3 cities? Because there
Yes.
is more mobile first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
अगर आप
Yeah.
मेट्रो सिटीज में इन्फ्लुएंसर में कम लगा रहे हो कंपेयर टू टियर 2, टियर 3.
बिल्कुल.
अच्छा.
बिल्कुल.
And but how do you measure the impact of? Do you also do the same kind of brand recall kind of campaigns or influencer marketing?
Yeah. आप कैंपेन्स कर रहे हो, आप देख रहे हो उस टीजी में, अगर मानो कोई किसी एक रीजन में है, उस रीजन में उस कैचमेंट एरिया में फ्लाइट्स की कन्वर्जन बढ़ रही है नहीं बढ़ रही है, होटल की बुकिंग्स बढ़ रही है नहीं बढ़ रही है, राइट? तो उस हिसाब से आप डेटा को देख रहे हो टू फिगर आउट कि उसका इम्पैक्ट आ रहा है नहीं आ रहा है. सम थिंग्स माइट बी मोर ऑब्वियस, मीनिंग यू माइट से अच्छा ये एक कूपन कोड है जो आप एक इन्फ्लुएंसर के साथ ट्राई कर रहे हो एट अ पर्टिकुलर पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम, उसका क्या रिटर्न आ रहा है, उसकी क्या अडॉप्शन आ रही है, right? Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So from simpler ways to more complex ways of mining the data.
Got it. So overall अगर ticketing industry की बात करते हैं, so
Right.
what would be the ticketing industry as such market size?
अगर आप market size देखो तो पिछले साल there were about 140 million people who traveled. 5,000 रुपए की average ticket अगर आप मान के चलो, so domestically
Only
it's
for the
like,
flight.
हाँ, only flight. So right, so this is domestically about 70,000 crores. Internationally अगर आप देख रहे हो तो again 23 million people traveling internationally. About 35 से 40,000 रुपए की एवरेज टिकट, इनफैक्ट उससे भी अब थोड़ा ऊपर ही होती जा रही है, तो about another 80,000 crores, right? So total flight market would be about 1.5 lakh crores. Yeah.
And at what point you decided to open up the other channels like hotels, cabs? ये सब चीजें आपने कब डिसाइड की कि ये करना है और क्यों?
See, एक बार जब हमें लगा कि फ्लाइट्स में क्रिटिकल मास, सो वी आर गोइंग प्रोडक्ट बाय प्रोडक्ट, राइट, सेइंग कि इस प्रोडक्ट में थोड़ा क्रिटिकल मास अचीव हो गया है, now let's move on to the next one, right? So hotels started in fact almost 10-11 years ago. We started a small organic business, then we acquired a company called Travel Guru, which at that time was the largest aggregator of hotels, right, which is I think around 2012-13 उस time frame में, and from there gradually hotels have scaled up, right? So that's been our focus, that take one product, make that product successful, add the next. We also at some point got to the stage where we had enough and more critical mass, and then you're thinking ki what else is this customer buying, right?
How do you figure that out?
I think you have to look at the economics of your own business, right? You have to look at the size and scale of your customer base and say कि आज मैं इस customer base को अगर मैं cross sell करता हूँ, so how much incremental revenue can I drive, and also what is the risk of me not having an incremental product leading that customer to a competitor, which then means I might lose that customer forever, right? Because the journey of the customer is quite different when it comes to travel. And I think it's similar in terms of e-commerce as well. आप maybe साल में 3 बार डोमेस्टिक फ्लाइट ले रहे हो, साल में 1 बार इंटरनेशनल फ्लाइट ले रहे हो, साल में 2 बार होटल ले रहे हो, साल में 5 बार बस, maybe 4-5 बार रेल, 3-4 बार, or maybe if you're in a metro for example and you don't have your own car, maybe साल में 15-20 बार cab, right? So the use cases might vary, but if you lose that customer once, does that mean that you could lose him forever? So which means that once you've got to that critical mass, you then need to be a one-stop shop.
Okay. So B2C side पे तो काफी कुछ अपने बात की, right? And you said that the composition and even focus is from increasing 7 million to 50 million when it comes to corporate side, right? पहले हम ये बात करते हैं, how do you reach out to corporates right now? Retail तो obviously marketing led है mostly. You create ads, you create so many influencer campaigns and you get customers.
Right.
How do you reach out businesses?
Sure. So enterprise businesses initially started off literally by door-to-door selling.
Okay.
Right? Go to a large office complex, which are the big companies over there, try and reach out. So to your question of how did we acquire the first 100 customers?
Yeah.
Acquiring the first 100 on corporate was much more difficult, right, than acquiring, let's say, 10,000 on B2C. B2C में ये भी है कि अगर if you're willing to spend, you'll be able to acquire customers. Corporate is not like that. Corporate becomes much more important from a product and technology fit perspective as well. Companies are not just focused on cost, they're focused on a much more holistic view because they also
And
factor in
efficiency.
employee satisfaction, right? They factor in efficiency of the process, back-end billing, reconciliation. You might be cheaper on price upfront, but agar uske baad you're leading to a lot of extra work in the organization, then it still doesn't solve the purpose, right? So it needs a more holistic product suite. So that was the first step. And then from there, it started off literally as door-to-door selling. Right? Looking at who are the key people, which are the companies which are more likely to adopt technology in the early days, and go after them. Once we had that, then the word of mouth started to build up from there, right? Then when it came to participating in terms of RFPs and RFQs, which are there
For the governments.
for government or even large private sector companies, right? They will put out, run through a RFP process, right? So you participate in that, you're able to showcase some of your other key customers that you're working with. Then it starts becoming a more virtuous cycle. If you're providing good service in your existing ones, that leads to positivity in the ecosystem. But the first 100 were the much more difficult ones. There it needed a much more scientific approach, layered with a certain amount of judgment. कि is this company likely to adopt technology? Then अगर आपको एक दो quick wins मिल रहे हैं उस category में, right, उस industry में, then you can go back and go deeper in that industry, right? And say it looks like there is a trend of digitization in this industry, right? So consulting guys who have a young workforce, highly educated workforce, very tech savvy, could be one of those, right? Which are your early adopters. IT services, BPOs could be another one,
Right.
which could be a potential early adopter, right? Banks. So looking at the profile of the employees, right?
Yeah.
We then started targeting from there. And then uske baad, then you go into different categories. Yeah.
तो 7 to 50 million पे कैसे जाना है?
See, 7 to 50 million, fortunately, Abhi, the flywheel in terms of word of mouth is very strong. But again, we have to actively expand the reach, go pitch to the next level of mid-tier companies in India, right? And from there, continue
Is it going
build
to
on.
be the same process of foot on foot?
See, थोड़ा बहुत तो वो रहेगा ही रहेगा. That's not going to go away, right? Especially the initial, maybe the initial qualification of a customer happens online, happens through a call center, right? Which we would do. But then the closing still needs to happen with that interface, right? Because our guys need to be there, give the customer the comfort that we are here, right, to service them. And if something goes wrong, there is human interface also available, right? There is obviously a certain amount of concern that people have when using technology, right? They want to have the assurance that tech is supported adequately as well, right? And it's not that once they sign up, they'll be left to their own device. Here, there is a 24/7 kind of support which is available over and above that. The support can vary from on-site to off-site depending on the size of the customer, right? And the needs of that customer. So it's a fairly flexible model that we've put in place with the understanding that India, still in corporate India, here I'm talking about not B2C India, corporate India for the next 10 years will still need that kind of hand-holding as you go deeper into the market. The top end will become more and more self-sufficient, but the new guys coming in will want some initial hand-holding, and to build that comfort, you need to provide that support. Then with every passing quarter, we've seen that the level of support needed keeps going down, right? People become much more familiar, and then once they're familiar, then only if there is a real exception that they need to reach out to you. Otherwise, they pretty much self-manage. Yeah.
Is that the reason you have recently introduced the meta search tool for the corporate bookings? What exactly is that?
So the meta search tool is actually to give corporates also the reassurance that if they want to work with multiple vendors, right, we can at least ensure that the experience for the employees is homogeneous. It's not a case one set of employees are being serviced with one product, another set of employees with a different product, and then they both have a different experience. And that leads to internal issues, politics for the CHRO to manage.
Yeah.
This way, at least there's one uniform tool, irrespective of who's the supplier in the backend.
Okay. So that integrates all the travel aggregators.
Yes, it could, right? So if as a company, for example, you're saying, I want to work with 3 vendors in the background, or I need to get multiple quotes to make sure that my employees are seeing the cheapest price, the tool can step in and do that.
So,
And that's more as a platform as a service,
got it.
right? So there will be, obviously there's a transaction-based model which is there, and then there's a platform as a service model which exists as well.
Got it. Did you ever thought of selling the same solution as a white label, exporting? Because there the adoption would be easier because the people in developed countries are more tech savvy. जैसे आप इंडिया में बोल रहे थे.
हाँ बिल्कुल. So अभी see, US is a difficult market and an expensive market to enter, but at least Middle Eastern markets, right? We've already started doing this.
Corporate bookings.
Corporate booking ke liye, right? We are looking at other parts in Southeast Asia. We have something in Africa as well. So in the developed world, we are trying to do, in the developing world, we are trying to do this. And some markets where there is markets like I said, like the Middle East, where there's a higher propensity to pay as well, right? In addition to that, we've started looking at some other markets as well, but we'll talk about it in due course.
दोनों में इंडिया वर्सेस साउथ ईस्ट एशिया या इस मार्केट्स की बात करें, सिंगापुर, ये सब, the adoption of technology or understanding of the technology, especially अगर मैं SME sector की बात करता हूँ, what exactly is your experience?
See, I've seen actually, surprisingly, India में technology adoption is very rapid. We've got a young workforce, we've got a very young population, and people, because they are using, or technology is their first way of transacting, the adoption is very high. So once it gets into an organization, see, there might be organizational level challenges that people don't want to give, let's say self-book rights to employees, etc. Once you overcome that hurdle and you can give them the assurance that whatever policy is defined, employees can only book within that policy, whatever approval process you have, all of those are automated and it won't be bypassed, right? Then people start doing that and they will allow employees to do this as well. Once employees are allowed, the adoption is very quick. I think that is something, because of the young workforce, happening very quickly in India. In mature markets, you might not have as younger workforce, you might have a more aging workforce, people might have been used to doing things in a particular manner, so changing behavior can be more complex. Whereas out here, it's like a clean slate, right? People are coming in fresh and don't really have a preconceived notion.
So, Dhruv, हमने ना बहुत बार ये सुना है, there are companies like Yatra SBI card भी है एक चीज, right? What exactly are these bundled credit cards? इसमें फायदा क्या होता है?
See, ये bundle, from a company's perspective, firstly, the objective is to target a loyal customer base, right? You know कि आपके कुछ frequent buyers हैं. How do you increase the affinity of those buyers and make sure they don't go to competition, right? So you're giving them layered benefits, not just in terms of travel, but in terms of other activities and spends that they might do, right? So it's a way to reward those customers and keep them loyal to you.
So how do you figure out कि यार ये बैंक के साथ हमें करना चाहिए? How do you figure out that?
See, you see customer overlap, again data, right? कौन सी बैंक के customers हैं, कौन सा segment है, right? जिसके ज़्यादा propensity है to transact with you, and then you work with the banks to see, how can you put together a proposition for them.
How much impact it happens or translates to when it comes to maybe increasing the booking percentage or retention percentage? कोई example?
Yeah. See, वहाँ पे you have to make sure कि the value proposition is good enough and strong enough, right? If the value proposition is not strong enough, then what happens is कि it doesn't really solve the use case that you've set out for. So it's very important to make sure that the value proposition is appropriate in that case. अगर हमारा case आप देखें, initially the value proposition was really strong, but then over a period of time they've been competing offers with credit card companies and maybe airlines, credit card companies and hotels. So we also have to keep refreshing our offer on that to make sure that a customer feels कि इसमें हाँ मेरे को value मिल रही है. Otherwise, the customer will use some other card as his or her primary card.
Right.
So it's a constant thing where you have to keep, again, mining the data, seeing the trend, seeing the pattern, and on the basis of that, keep tweaking it around. And if you do it correctly, then it can meaningfully improve retention of that core base.
competition की आपने बात की, right? Many players out there, of course, in this travel aggregator, industry. अब as a consumer, especially अगर हम इंडिया की बात करें, my first preference usually would be कि जहाँ टिकट सस्ती मिल रही है वहाँ चले जाओ. Usually, especially for the first time buyers, right? Who doesn't really have a relationship with Yatra.
Right.
So, how do you acquire? How do you ensure कि यार ये मेरे पास ही आए?
Right.
What exactly do you think of that?
So I think that is where, firstly, that is definitely a challenge, right? For all products, not just for us. And that's where the brand comes into the picture. The brand helps build trust. And especially when you're transacting and coming into a category for the first time, you want to do it with someone where there is a certain amount of trust. Because एयर टिकट एक ऐसी चीज भी है जहां अगर प्लान चेंज हो गया और आपको कैंसिल या रिफंड करना पड़ा तो आप फंस भी सकते, right? Which is what has happened to a number of people, right? So that's why having the brand trust, that here is a brand which is reputed, here is a brand that's been there for a long period of time, I can trust this, becomes important. But in this category again, like it's a price sensitive one, so trust can only help you bridge a certain amount of gap, right? I mean, अगर obviously आपको कहीं domestic का example लें, 200 रुपए सस्ती टिकट मिल रही है, तो most people in India will take that risk. They shouldn't, but they will, right? Because it's a very, very price sensitive market, right? So you still have to be, in addition to building the brand, always be competitive when it comes to pricing, but then you need to have some other way in which you're able to mine that customer to be able to offset the cost of acquisition. अगर आप वो नहीं कर रहे हो, then you're perpetually in a loss-making mode. Then it's like the more you sell, the more you lose. And that's not really a great way to build a business, right? You can do it in a short term, but that's not really a sustainable way to do this. So you have to find some other vector through which you can acquire customers in a cost-effective manner. अब जैसे हम लोगों के केस में we focus on the personal travel of the employees, because वहाँ मैं Google को कुछ नहीं दे रहा, right? मैं Skyscanner को कुछ नहीं दे रहा. So I would rather be price competitive on that channel and from there drive loyal customers.
Right. Because already the corporate is a part of your
Absolutely.
program.
It's on the same platform, right? The employee just needs to toggle simply between personal and official travel. And uske basis pe the app or the desktop, whichever he or she is using, will give him the appropriate fares.
Which is why the focus is always more on corporate bookings.
That's right. Because then it's a joint acquisition strategy that one can adopt.
Got it. Got it. Corporates में तो आप बहुत सारे products launch कर ही रहे हो. In fact, you've just introduced freight booking. Freight business में भी expansion किया आपने, right? Why into freight?
See, freight actually happened during COVID, right? Because travel became zero. We had a large workforce. We reached out to our customers, to the CFOs, some of our big customers, to get them to give us ideas around what were the other challenges that they were facing, right? From a procurement standpoint. And freight, especially for our large manufacturing customers, stood out as a big problem, right? The freight industry and the kind of attributes and the words people used with it, opaque, lack of transparency, volatile pricing, all of these, right, were areas and avenues which would help online create a much stronger value proposition. Because with online, you instantly bring transparency, you bring the power into the hands of the consumer, you disintermediate the market, right? All of those were attributes that just seemed, the words were just fitting in perfectly with that. So we started building out a freight engine for that. Freight, however, is a much more complex product than travel. Obviously, the size of the freight industry also is multiple times larger than the travel industry, but it's also a much more complex product, right? So it needs significant amount of technology chops to build something out like this. There are only a handful of global players like Flexport which are, able to successfully do this. We thought we had experience of building out SaaS technology platforms. We had experience of working at least with one part of the suppliers, the airlines. No experience on the shipping side, but at least on the airline side. And then we had access to a large customer base. Right? A number of our large corporate customers have tremendous amount of crores, hundreds of crores of spend happening on freight, right? So we thought we had most of the ingredients needed to be able to build out a successful solution. It's still in its nascency. I mean, this is the way I think about this is ki for the next decade, travel will continue to boom in India, right? Before it starts slowing down in terms of growth once you get to a certain degree of penetration. Freight is the decade after the journey. Right now we are sowing the seeds, but it's like a 5 to 10 year horizon where between years 5 to 10, we'll start seeing freight scale up to a big company, and then 10 to 15 become a really large contributing business for us, and maybe become, the business of the future.
And that also complements your strategy of 7 to 50 million of corporates.
That's right. Yeah.
Because eventually those are the businesses who are also going to do freight business as well.
Yeah.
Okay. तो अब बात थोड़ी सी मुझे समझनी है, what is your outlook on AI? Because travel के अंदर especially generative AI, chat GPT, tools like these. अब आज की डेट में मैं बस जाता हूँ chat GPT पे लिखता हूँ कि मुझे यहाँ से यहाँ जाना है, create a travel plan or itinerary for me. What exactly is Yatra outlook on that? आप लोग भी उस बारे में सोचते हो कि हमें कुछ बनाना है?
Quite deeply. And as a first step, our focus has been in terms of making sure how do we use these tools to provide a more homogeneous experience to our customers. See, हमारी category में 90% of things will happen touchless and seamless. It's all about exception handling. कि वो 10% cases में या 7% या 2% whatever that metric is depending on the product, जहाँ exceptions come up and human interface is needed, how do you provide a seamless experience? How do you move away from the fact कि आज नितिन ने यात्रा में फ़ोन किया और ध्रुव ने फ़ोन उठाया, कल किसी और ने फ़ोन उठाया, दोनों के बीच में customer experience should not be a function of which side of bed I have gotten out of. मेरा मूड अच्छा है, मैंने अच्छी सर्विस प्रोवाइड करी, मेरे कॉलीग का मूड खराब है, आज जिसको नितिन ने फ़ोन किया उसने वापस उसको कॉल बैक नहीं किया, right? How do you move away from that? So using generative AI as a first layer of defense to provide a seamless experience to customers, I think is a starting block for us. वहाँ से then, once this cannot service, you then bring in human interface. But at least we've seen a large part of our use cases can be addressed in a very seamless manner using this.
कोई specific itinerary planning की अगर हम बात
I mean, itinerary planning एक example है. वहाँ फिर भी I feel कि you need a certain amount of maybe human interface, right? Just to itinerary planning पे be able to match it better based on your profile. But if I talk about more basic and simpler things around cancellation charges, around rescheduling, right? These are very simple use cases.
Especially the customer support side.
Exactly, right? So we are starting from there, putting the tools in place to be able to streamline and harmonize that as a first step. Then from there, it'll start opening up into more recommendation-led. Right? So that's the way we are thinking about it from a step-by-step journey.
Does this also translate to voice?
It will. It will. It's just a matter of time. About, I think time 6 महीने साल है या साल 2 साल है. I think that is the only debate to my mind. Right? Because the accuracy of voice is also improving very significantly. Right? कई साल पहले एक there's a very famous internet analyst called Mary Meeker, right? उसकी मैंने एक presentation देखी थी, and she was talking about adoption of some of these things around technology and the accuracy of technology and the change in adoption. I don't remember the exact data on this, but her point was, if at 90% you are at 50-60% adoption, 90 moving to 97 will not take it up by 10%. It will take the 50-60 to 80-90. So there's a quantum leap that happens, an exponential jump that happens once technology accuracy goes above a certain threshold. Voice, I think, is one of those which I feel is somewhere close to that 90% kind of mark, maybe even a lower. But once it breaches a certain threshold, the adoption is just going to be on a hockey stick. Right? And we are very close to that. So I feel that maybe it's like a 6 to 12 month or a 12 to 24 month, but not beyond that.
Amazing. Yatra has already been listed on Nasdaq, right?
Right.
And just now there is an IPO in India.
Yeah.
Congratulations
Right.
for that.
Thank you.
पहले तो
Thank you.
अब अगर लेमैन को समझना हो कि यार IPO कैसे किया जाता
Right.
है, तो इंडिया में स्पेशली उसका क्या प्रोसेस है, एंड उसके बाद मुझे आप ये बताना व्हाई Nasdaq वर्सेस इंडिया की अगर हम बात करें, व्हाट वाज इजियर एंड डिफिकल्ट.
Right. Okay.
या
ठीक है. So let's work first with the simpler one of the India process, right? So India typically you will put together a DRHP with your bankers and your lawyers. उससे भी एक स्टेप अगर पहले लें, so as a company you will assess कि आपके business के लिए is there appetite or not. And I feel even before as a founder you go to the market, you should assess for yourself कि is your business at a stage where it can withstand quarterly scrutiny. Does it have that predictability, right? Is your business model immune to external forces, at least to a certain extent? Can it withstand external shocks? Can it withstand competitive intensity going up, right? Only if you're able to answer all of those in the affirmative should you even think about it. अगर आपको लगता है कि business is still evolving and quarterly scrutiny will not let you play out your vision fully, then you should stay back, let it build out first and get to that stage before you can go public. I think some companies in the internet world took the step of going public a bit too prematurely. And then it's had, very dire consequences, right, for them. And this is not just an India phenomenon. I mean, even globally, if you see on the Nasdaq, there were so many companies that went public in the post-COVID kind of boom years, right, from a public market perspective. And a number of them today are really struggling. We had a reverse scenario in the US, right, where because of COVID and we were going through a merger process which didn't work out again because of COVID, the stock price completely collapsed. And the impact of that in terms of the time and effort that it takes to try and rebuild something, it's immense from a management bandwidth perspective, right? So my take is that do this only if you've got pretty much everything under control and a lot of predictability. So coming back to your question on India process, right? Once you've answered those questions, then you'll work with your bankers and your lawyers to put together a DRHP, which is the draft red herring prospectus. That's a fairly detailed 400-500 page document that spells out your business, your financial performance, the kind of risk associated with your business. And then that goes through a process of a review with SEBI. SEBI will take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to give you the necessary clearance. Once you get the
SEBI charges
clearance,
a fee for that.
yeah, there is a fee which is linked into the amount of capital that you're raising, right? And from there, once you get the SEBI clearance, then you start a book building process, right? It varies again depending on if in the past 3 years you've had a loss in any one of the years, then you need to build a higher proportion of your book from qualified investors. And if you've been profitable in the past 3, you can go largely and be focused more on retail, right? In our case, because we had COVID in some of the middle years, we had a loss in one of the years. So we had to focus more on the institutional investor side of things and build a book from there. Book building means that you're going out, you're making presentations to the analysts and the fund managers and the mutual fund managers and getting them excited about your business, your story, your growth prospects. And on the basis of that, they will commit to participate in your IPO. Once you go through that process, you will also have a certain amount of price discovery happening where the banks and the analysts will look at peers, look at comps, and then figure out where the right pricing is. And then, like with most other things in this, it's a certain amount of negotiation with the fund managers on the other side to come at the right number. Right? Once you've built the book, then you can go and launch the offer for public subscription. Right? And you go through that process on the public side for 3 days. And then after that, the book closes and you list. So it is a fairly, it's like a 12-month kind of process you need to be prepared for. It will take maybe, if you do it faster, that's great. But just be prepared of it as a 12-month cycle because then you've got financial statements that need to be audited, your, restated financial statements to be filed and all of that process on the accounting side also that needs to happen. So there is a lot of work involved in this process. And as I said, it's important for the company to be able to withstand all of this and yet keep performing quarter on quarter. Because the worst thing you can do is that you go through the IPO process and your numbers don't support it. आपने DRH भी तो file कर दिया, but 4 quarter बाद, when it's time to hit the market, you realize that your numbers are not really trending in the direction that can support an IPO.
So it's very important to have
important that as a
predictability.
company, right, everything is geared up to be able to support this process.
And what about Nasdaq?
Nasdaq also, the process is similar. Obviously, as an Indian company, as a foreign issuer, there are more complex rules that you need to subscribe to. There are things like SOX compliance that come into the picture. So it is a slightly more complex process. The amount of education that you need to do to investors over there also is larger because they're not as familiar, right? India में तो हम जब road show कर रहे थे तो either people had bought tickets with Yatra as consumers, or maybe their company had used Yatra, or they had worked with some other company in the past where they were using Yatra, so they're familiar with the product and the service. In the US, that's not the case, right? So you're going and starting from scratch to say, what does Yatra really do, right? So it's a different hurdle to cross. And then similarly, when you're working with the SEC, they will have more nuanced questions, more questions around trying to understand what is it that you're doing, what are the risk factors involved, is there adequate disclosure. So the work and amount of effort involved is a bit more on that side versus India.
Okay, cool. It was very amazing to talk to you. It's so much of information that you have shared with us. I'm sure मेरे पास तो और 200-300 questions हैं जो मैं आपसे पूछता रहूँगा. But obviously the time is limited.
Sure.
So thank you for being here, sir.
Not at all.
बहुत मजा आया, Dhruv.
Yeah.
And if you have anything to say to young entrepreneurs or students or marketers, maybe if you want to talk about that. कुछ आपको
So my
कहना
parting
तो?
thought on this, right, is कि I feel India में हम लोगों के लिए, right, people born in the last maybe 40-50 years and those who are, in their teens right now, it is a once in a lifetime opportunity, right? Our parents never had it. Unlikely our kids will have it. This era of high growth and kind of, rapid expansion that India is going through is there for a finite period of time. I mean, US had it in the baby boomer years. China had it in the 90s and early 2000s. It's now India's time. So you've got this opportunity just by being fortunate enough to be born in the right country at the right time. So make the most of it. Don't waste this opportunity. I mean, that is what really drives me also. I get up every morning thinking of that. कि यार, अभी भगवान ने opportunity दी है, इसको waste नहीं करना. We have to make something out of it.
Yeah.
Which is what I tell all young entrepreneurs. There is this opportunity, make the most of it. Don't waste it, यार.
एक क्वेश्चन मुझे याद आ गया,
please,
सॉरी. बहुत सारे लोगों ने बोला था पूछने के लिए. So when we do this any session with anyone,
Right.
we generally ask the community कि आप क्या क्वेश्चन पूछना चाहोगे, right? Surprisingly, most of them wanted to know what are the perks of being a CEO of a company like Yatra.com.
I think perks is ज़्यादा, there is a responsibility, right? And let me paraphrase Marvel Comics and Spider-Man in this, right? With great power comes great responsibility.
Right? Yeah.
So that's how it is about being a CEO, that while you think there is power, there is a lot of responsibility that comes with it. So one has to be willing to shoulder the responsibility, and that's, I think, the more important aspect of it. The perk is the satisfaction of having created something. The perk is that someone like you is willing to sit across the table and give you an hour to listen to what you have to say. Right? Those are perks.
Yeah.
But everything comes with responsibility.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you.